In a church confessional booth, I heard my fiancé whisper, "Forgive me, Father. I cheated. I've been sleeping with his best friend for months." I never thought the quietest place I knew would end up being the loudest moment of my life. For years, whenever I felt overwhelmed, I went to the small stone church on the edge of town. It wasn't about religion for me. It was about silence, about hearing nothing but the creak of old wood and the faint echo of my own breathing. That night, I didn't go there looking for forgiveness. I went there looking for calm. The wedding was less than a month away, and every conversation I had lately ended up being about guest lists, venues, or money. My fiancée, Clara, had been unusually tense for weeks. She blamed stress. I told myself the same. Still, there was something in the way she moved lately, a restlessness I couldn't explain. She'd always been composed, always planning 10 steps ahead. Now she jumped when the phone rang and avoided my eyes in small, fleeting moments that vanished before I could ask anything. I entered the church through the heavy wooden doors and let the quiet swallow me whole. The place smelled of candle wax and faint incense. Light flickered on the stained glass windows, painting the pews in fractured reds and blues. I sat for a long moment before the confessional booth caught my attention. I hadn't been inside one since I was a child, dragged there by my mother. I didn't believe in the ritual, but I wanted a space to breathe, hidden from the world. So I slipped inside. The booth was dark, close, almost suffocating. The wood creaked under my weight, and the lattice between my side and the other remained empty. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the stillness wash over me. That's when I heard the shuffle of footsteps. Someone else was entering the opposite booth. At first, I thought it was the priest, but then a softer voice broke the silence. Not a man's voice, a woman's. It wasn't just any woman. I knew that voice. I had heard it whisper in the dark, laugh in the morning, argue over bills, and say yes when I asked her to marry me. It was Clara. My body stiffened instantly, my breath shallow. For a moment, I thought maybe I was mistaken. The walls warped sound, and stress could play tricks. But then I heard her again, clearer this time, trembling but steady enough to recognize. She began speaking. At first, I thought she was here for the same reason I was. Nerves, guilt over something small, maybe a bad thought she carried. But then the words that left her mouth cut through me like glass. She said she had betrayed me. She spoke slowly, as though the words themselves weighed her down. She told the unseen priest that she had been unfaithful, and not in a passing, meaningless way. She admitted she had been involved with someone else for months. The name she whispered next made the walls tilt around me. Daniel. Not just anyone. My best friend. The man who had stood beside me through college, who had shared countless nights of laughter and cheap beer, who was supposed to stand next to me as best man at the wedding. My skin burned. My hands tightened into fists against my knees, nails pressing crescents into my palms. Every sound in the church seemed magnified. The flick of a candle, the soft hum of an organ far away, the tremble in Clara's throat as she said she didn't know how to stop. She spoke about guilt, about fear, about the possibility that maybe she didn't deserve forgiveness. I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt as if the smallest shift in my body would betray me, would alert her that I was sitting less than 3 feet away, listening to every word. The irony of it all hit me with brutal clarity. Here I was, searching for silence, and she was across from me, filling that silence with the one truth that would change everything. She continued, her voice rising and falling in waves. She said Daniel made her feel alive, that it started innocently, late-night talks, accidental touches, the kind of excuses people always convince themselves are harmless. But then it became meetings, lies, whole evenings stolen from me while I worked overtime or spent nights planning a life for us. The worst part was how matter-of-fact her words sounded. It wasn't wild passion or a reckless mistake. It was routine. It was woven into the fabric of her days while I had been blind, too busy trusting her, too proud to question my best friend. I wanted to tear open the divider, to confront her right there in the booth, but something heavier pinned me in place. My heart thundered, but my mind cut through it with a strange, cold clarity. If I confronted her now, I would get nothing but excuses. Lies built on top of lies. If I stayed silent, I could listen, learn more than she ever intended me to know. So I sat still, silent as stone, while my fiancée poured out every secret she thought safe in the darkness. When she finally stopped speaking, there was a silence that stretched so long it felt unbearable. Then I heard the priest murmur something low and gentle, but I didn't register his words. My own heartbeat drowned them out. She left before I did. I waited until her footsteps faded across the stone floor, waited until the door shut behind her. Only then did I emerge, the cool air of the nave striking my face like a slap. I saw her near the front, lighting a candle. Her posture was calm, serene even, as if the act of confession had lightened her soul. She glanced back once, scanning the pews, but her eyes slid right past me. She had no idea I'd been there. I followed her at a distance when she left the church. I didn't plan it, but my legs carried me after her. She didn't go home immediately. She walked down 2 streets, stopped to check her phone, then slipped into a small cafe. Through the glass, I saw her smile faintly at a message she received. Not the smile she gave me these days. This one had warmth. I didn't go inside. I stood outside in the cold evening air, my breath fogging against the window, watching her laugh at something no one else could see. She didn't look like a woman torn by guilt. She looked relieved. I walked home alone, each step heavier than the last. My apartment felt alien when I entered it. The photos on the wall, vacations, birthdays, engagement parties, looked staged, like props from a play I hadn't realized I was in. Every object had been touched by her, arranged by her hands. Now it all felt contaminated, fragile, ready to collapse under the weight of truth. I sat in the dark for hours, replaying her words again and again, analyzing the cadence of her voice, the way she lingered on Daniel's name. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a mistake. It was a second life she had been building behind my back. And Daniel, of all people, the betrayal ran deeper than I could articulate. I thought of every moment I had defended him, every time I had trusted him implicitly, every conversation where he had looked me in the eye and smiled while sneaking behind my back. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat by the window, staring at the faint glow of the streetlights, and realized something with terrifying certainty. If I wanted to survive this without being destroyed, I couldn't explode. I couldn't scream, couldn't rage, couldn't let either of them know I had heard. Not yet. If Clara and Daniel were capable of betraying me this thoroughly, then they were capable of lying to my face just as smoothly. I needed truth, hard proof, undeniable evidence. If I had that, then no excuse, no manipulation could twist the story. By the time the sun began to creep across the horizon, my path was clear. I wasn't going to confront her in a booth or in the quiet of our home. I was going to watch, wait, and learn everything she thought she had hidden. Only then would I decide how to burn down the lie they built together. The morning after the confessional booth, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Clara woke up late, yawning, stretching like nothing in the world was wrong. She padded into the kitchen, kissed my cheek casually, and asked if I wanted coffee. Her tone was light, normal, the same rhythm of our mornings for years. I almost admired how effortlessly she could shift back into her role, as if the night before had never happened. I watched her move around the kitchen, every motion under a microscope now. When her phone buzzed on the counter, she glanced at it too quickly, lips pressing together in a brief smile before she tucked it under a napkin. She thought I hadn't noticed. That small detail confirmed everything I already knew. The booth wasn't guilt slipping through cracks. It was a confession of her second life. I forced myself to smile, to drink the coffee she handed me, to act like nothing had shifted. Inside, though, I cataloged every move, every look, every time her eyes flicked to that phone. By afternoon, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait. If she and Daniel had been hiding this for months, I needed to catch them in their own carelessness. I started small. I checked her social media accounts. Nothing obvious. Clara was careful, only posting pictures of us, family gatherings, or shots of the dog she adored. But then I noticed gaps. There were weekends she claimed to have been at her mother's helping with errands, but there were no photos, no tags from her sisters, nothing to corroborate. Just silence. I compared those dates with my own calendar. They matched perfectly with the nights Daniel had told me he was busy or helping an old friend. The coincidences lined up too neatly. That gave me my first thread to pull. I remembered that Daniel had once left his laptop open during a game night, and I'd seen the email service he used. I wasn't going to hack anything. I wasn't reckless, but I could still pay attention to patterns. The next day, when I saw him at work, I casually asked about a project deadline, pretending I needed to cross-check with his schedule. He gave me vague answers, but the times didn't line up with the excuses Clara had given. The more I compared, the more the inconsistencies multiplied. Still, suspicion wasn't enough. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable. I reached out to an old friend, Marcus, who ran a small private security business. He wasn't a detective in the cinematic sense, no trench coat, no back-alley meetings, but he knew how to track people, how to get details quietly. I told him I suspected Clara was hiding something, leaving out Daniel's name at first. Marcus raised his eyebrows, but didn't press. He just asked if I wanted a GPS tracker for her car. I hesitated. Part of me felt sick at the thought of planting something like that, but then I pictured her face in the booth, whispering another man's name. My hesitation evaporated. I set it up one evening when she went to shower. It was small, magnetic, and easy to hide under the back bumper. She never noticed. The following week felt endless. Every time she left the house, I checked my phone to see where she went. At first, nothing suspicious. Grocery store, her sister's place, work. I almost doubted myself. Maybe she had been truthful in confession because she was ending things, because she wanted to move on. Then Thursday came. She told me she was staying late at work for a meeting. I checked the tracker around 7 p.m. Her car wasn't at her office. It was parked outside a mid-range hotel on the other side of town. I sat in my car across the street, engine off, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The hours passed slowly, traffic thinning as night deepened. Around 10 p.m., I saw the lobby doors open. Clara walked out, her hair loose, a jacket draped over her arm. Right behind her was Daniel. They didn't hold hands, didn't touch, but the way they moved told the story clearly. They left through different doors, walking to separate cars like strangers. But the glance they exchanged before parting was enough. That unspoken acknowledgement between them burned itself into my brain. I drove home ahead of her, my chest tight, my jaw aching from how hard I clenched it. When she arrived, she smiled faintly and said the meeting had dragged on. I kissed her cheek, hiding the bile rising in my throat, and told her to get some rest. That night, I barely slept again. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case piece by piece. The tracker showed 3 more hotel visits. Always on nights, she claimed to be working late or visiting her mother. I collected receipts from the hotel bar with Daniel's name on them, slipped from a careless bartender who assumed I was splitting a tab. I even overheard them once at the cafe she frequented, speaking in low voices but close enough for me to catch a fragment about being careful until the wedding. Every discovery carved me deeper, but it also fueled me. The more I uncovered, the more deliberate they seemed. It wasn't a fling born of impulse. It was calculated, organized. She was balancing 2 lives and planned to walk into marriage with me while keeping Daniel hidden in the shadows. The hardest part was pretending around both of them. Daniel still called me brother, slapped me on the back, laughed at my jokes. I studied him with new eyes, every smile a mask, every pause a cover. Clara kissed me, discussed honeymoon plans, asked about flower arrangements. I answered calmly, hiding the storm inside me, waiting for the moment to turn it back on them. One evening, I invited Daniel over for drinks, forcing myself through the motions of friendship. We sat in the living room, sipping whiskey, talking about old times. I asked him if he was seeing anyone. He shook his head, eyes steady, lips curling into an easy grin. The lie rolled off his tongue without hesitation. That was the final piece I needed. It wasn't just Clara betraying me. It was Daniel, too, willing to smile in my home, drink from my glass, and stab me in the back with the same ease. By the end of that night, my plan shifted. Evidence was no longer for me alone. It was a weapon, and I was going to use it. But I couldn't rush. If I struck too soon, they'd spin it, twist it, make me look unstable. I needed a stage, an audience, a moment where there would be no denying what they had done. So I began preparing. I printed the receipts, stored the GPS logs, and even recorded one of their conversations outside the cafe, where Daniel joked about how clueless I was. It wasn't illegal. It was in public, and they hadn't noticed me at the next table. Hearing their laughter again and again kept me awake at night, but it also hardened me. I rehearsed conversations in my head, ways I could corner them. At the same time, I secured myself, called vendors, checked on the prenup paperwork, ensured no joint accounts were vulnerable. Clara thought she was planning a wedding, but I was preparing for an execution. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Clara wanted the image of marriage, the security of my name and finances, while sneaking away to Daniel for whatever he gave her. That realization killed whatever remained of the man who had walked into the church that night seeking silence. I was no longer seeking calm. I was building a case, one she couldn't escape from. The last straw came 2 nights before my birthday. Clara said she was going to dinner with her sister. The tracker led me instead to Daniel's apartment. I parked half a block away and watched the lights in his living room flicker until nearly midnight. When she left, her hair was damp, her jacket slung loosely over her arm. She drove home like nothing happened, and when she walked through the door, she kissed me on the cheek, whispered happy early birthday, and slipped into bed. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, my heart silent now, no longer racing. The time for shock had passed. I had enough. Now, it was only a matter of setting the stage. By the time I reached the end of those 2 weeks, I no longer felt like the man who had once trusted Clara with every detail of his life. I had stopped thinking like a fiancé and had started thinking like a strategist. Every interaction with her became part of a performance, every word weighed, every smile measured. If she could live 2 lives, so could I. But the difference was simple. She thought she was hiding a secret. I was building a stage. I began by preparing the people around us. Clara believed her family adored her too much to ever doubt her. She was right, to an extent. Her mother had always seen me as a convenient match, dependable, steady, a man who would give her daughter stability. Her father respected me, but only in the practical sense, someone who paid bills on time and made plans 5 years ahead. They were blind to who Clara really was, or maybe they chose to be. Daniel, of course, was woven into that circle too. He had been my shadow since college, the friend who carried boxes when I moved, the one who toasted me at my engagement party, the man who stood beside me in every photo with a wide, open grin. To everyone else, he was my brother in everything but blood. That was what made this betrayal so lethal. Alone, Clara could be dismissed as a mistake. Alone, Daniel could be forgiven for weakness. Together, their deception created a wound too deep to ignore. I knew confronting them in private would achieve nothing. They would spin, twist, and cast doubt until the edges blurred. I needed to corner them where their masks couldn't hold, where other eyes could witness the fracture. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Clara suggested we host a small dinner with a handful of close friends, a kind of pre-celebration for my upcoming birthday. It was perfect. She thought it would show unity, that smiling in front of others would prove how solid we were. For me, it was the perfect stage. In the days leading up to the dinner, I prepared carefully. I compiled the receipts from the hotel bar, the GPS logs, and even the recording from the cafe where Daniel laughed about keeping secrets. I made copies, storing them in a folder. Not digital, physical. Paper had weight, sound, permanence. It couldn't be brushed aside as easily as a photo on a phone. I also reached out to Marcus again. He wasn't just a tracker guy, he knew how to record discreetly. I asked him to help set up a small device in my living room, tucked near the cabinet. I didn't tell him everything, only that I wanted insurance. He didn't ask questions, just delivered. On the day of the dinner, I acted as though it was any other evening. I grilled steaks, laid out wine, and arranged the table while Clara busied herself with the decorations. She seemed almost radiant, her stress evaporated, her laughter flowing easily as guests began to arrive. Daniel was among the first. He greeted me with a firm handshake, clapped me on the shoulder, and complimented the smell of the food. His eyes, however, flicked briefly toward Clara when he thought no one was looking. It was the kind of look you wouldn't notice if you weren't watching for it. But I had trained myself to see every crack. The living room filled with conversation and laughter. Friends reminisced about college, about vacations, about the first time Clara and I had met. Everyone drank, talked, relaxed. On the surface, it was exactly what Clara wanted, a picture of stability, of joy. I waited until after dinner, when the table was still cluttered with plates and glasses, and the room hummed with half-drunken ease. Then I leaned back, swirling the last of my drink in my glass, and spoke casually. "It's strange, isn't it?" I said, "how people can live two completely different lives at the same time." The room quieted a little. A couple of friends laughed awkwardly, unsure where I was going. Clara's hand froze on her glass. Daniel's smile flickered. I continued, my tone light, as if telling a story. I read about a man once who had a whole second family in another city. Nobody suspected anything for years. He pulled it off because he knew how to cover his tracks. Different excuses, careful timing, even friends who unknowingly backed his stories. One friend chuckled nervously, muttering something about how wild people could be. Clara forced a laugh too, but it came out sharp, brittle. Daniel stayed silent. I turned to him, meeting his eyes. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How long a secret like that could stay hidden before someone noticed? His smile collapsed. He looked down at his glass. The silence in the room grew heavier. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her face paling. That was when I reached under my chair and pulled out the folder. I set it on the table slowly, deliberately, the weight of it landing with a dull thud. Inside were the receipts, the logs, the recording transcript. I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there, the implication louder than any words. Clara's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "What's this supposed to be?" I looked at her evenly. "The truth." Daniel shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. He didn't speak, didn't try to defend himself. That silence alone was as damning as the evidence. I opened the folder, sliding one receipt across the table. It bore Daniel's name, dated the same night Clara had claimed she was at her mother's. Then another, a GPS log showing her car parked outside the hotel. Then the transcript, detailing the fragments of their conversation at the cafe. The room erupted into murmurs. Friends exchanged stunned glances. Clara's face went pale, then flushed deep red. She reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. "This," I said calmly, "is what you've both been doing while smiling at me across the table, while planning a wedding, while calling me brother." Clara stammered something about lies, about manipulation, about misunderstanding. Her voice cracked, her words stumbling over one another. Daniel finally opened his mouth, but all that came out was a flat, defeated sigh. The silence of the others crushed down harder than any accusation I could have made. Watching their faces shift, disbelief, anger, pity, was more powerful than raising my voice. Clara reached out to me then, her mask slipping into desperation. "James, please, we can talk about this privately. Don't do this here." I met her gaze steadily. "No, Clara. Privacy is where you built your lies. This is where they end." Her composure broke completely. She stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, tears streaking down her face. She tried to spin the story, claiming I was paranoid, that I had set her up. But the evidence on the table was too clear, too specific. Every attempt to twist it only dug her deeper. Daniel didn't defend her. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there, staring at the floor, his silence louder than any confession. The room fractured after that. Friends excused themselves awkwardly, unable to bear the weight of the tension. One of them muttered that they didn't know what to say. Another shot Daniel a look of disgust before leaving. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, the house was silent. Clara stood trembling near the wall, her face streaked with tears and smeared makeup. Daniel remained slumped in his chair, head bowed. I gathered the folder calmly, tucking the evidence back inside. Neither of them spoke. Then I looked at them both and said quietly, "This isn't finished, but it's over." I left the room before either of them could answer, the sound of my footsteps echoing down the hallway. The silence in the house after everyone left was suffocating. I could hear the faint tick of the clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, even the sound of Clara's uneven breathing. She stood frozen near the wall, arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was bracing against a storm. Daniel stayed in his chair, head down, not daring to look at me. For a long moment, I just stood there, the folder of evidence in my hand. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel after exposing them. Maybe rage, maybe relief. Instead, there was only exhaustion, a bone-deep emptiness that felt heavier than anger ever could. Finally, I set the folder down on the counter and spoke. My voice was calm, steady, almost too controlled. "The wedding's off. You both knew that the moment I laid this out." Clara's head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. She stepped toward me, reaching out like she could pull me back into the role she had written for me. "James, please, don't do this. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end everything." Her words would have cut me once. They would have twisted inside me, left me doubting my own instincts. But now, armed with months of evidence, I saw them for what they were, survival tactics. "You didn't make a mistake," I said, meeting her gaze. "You built a second life. You planned a wedding while sneaking off to hotels with Daniel. That isn't a slip. That's a choice." Daniel finally looked up, his face gray and hollow. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but I cut him off before a sound came out. "Save it. You had months to say something, to stop this. You chose silence. Don't waste my time with excuses now." His mouth closed again. He stared at the table, shoulders slumped, the picture of defeat. Clara's mask cracked further. She turned desperate, her voice rising. "You don't understand. I love you, James. I don't know why I did it. I was scared of losing you, and Daniel was." I held up a hand. Don't insult me with half-truths. You weren't scared of losing me. You were scared of losing both of us. You wanted security from me and whatever he gave you on the side. You thought you could keep both." Her lips trembled. She tried to speak again, but the words collapsed into a sob. I didn't stay to comfort her. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase, and began packing. Shirts, pants, essentials. Every zipper and fold sounded final. Clara followed me, pleading, insisting she could fix it, begging me to reconsider. Her words bounced off me like dull echoes. By the time I wheeled the suitcase into the hall, Daniel had slipped out. Cowered to the end. Clara stood there, tear-streaked and shaking, blocking the door like she thought her presence alone could stop me. I set the suitcase down and looked at her one last time. "You'll hear from my lawyer tomorrow. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my door." Then I walked past her, opened the door, and stepped into the cold night air. The click of the lock behind me was the cleanest sound I had heard in weeks. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to Marcus's place, crashing on his couch for the night. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket and a bottle of water. For the first time in days, I slept without jolting awake every hour. The next morning, I called the venue and canceled the wedding. I called the florist, the caterer, every vendor whose names Clara had repeated endlessly over the past months. One by one, I shut down the plans. Some deposits were lost, but I didn't care. The money was nothing compared to what I had just saved myself from. When I called my lawyer, I explained everything. He was blunt. You're lucky you found out now. If you'd married her, half your assets would already be at risk. We drafted paperwork, cancellation of shared accounts, removal of her access to my finances, and formal notices to ensure she couldn't touch anything without my consent. By the afternoon, my phone lit up with missed calls. 27 from Clara, 6 from her mother, 2 from her father, none from Daniel. Clara's parents showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I didn't let them in. We spoke in the hallway, their faces twisted with disbelief and anger, not at me, but at her. Her mother demanded to know if the accusations were true. I handed her a copy of the folder. She flipped through the receipts, the logs, the transcript, her face draining of color. She told us you fabricated this, her mother whispered. Read the dates. Read the names. You'll see who's lying, I replied. Her father didn't speak until they turned to leave. He looked at me, his expression heavy with disappointment. You deserved better than her, he said quietly, then walked away. The fallout hit Clara hard. Friends began pulling away. Words spread faster than she realized. Some from those at the dinner, others from whispers that traveled through our circle. She tried to salvage her image, telling people I had turned paranoid, that I had set her up. But every time someone doubted me, I showed them the folder. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. Daniel fared no better. He lost his position in our friend group overnight. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. He tried to corner me once outside work, asking if there was any way to fix things. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "The day you decided to touch her was the day you lost me. There's nothing left to fix." He didn't bother me again. As weeks passed, the weight lifted. I moved my belongings out of the apartment and into a new place. The silence there was different, not suffocating, but clean. My routines shifted. My mornings were my own again, without Clara's phone buzzing in the background, without the shadow of secrets hovering over every conversation. But freedom didn't mean peace. There were scars. Trust was no longer something I could give freely. Every casual word from friends, every half-smile from coworkers, I examined them, measured them, looked for cracks. Some nights I still woke up with the echo of her voice in the booth replaying in my head. And yet, there was a strange strength in it too. I hadn't lost everything. I had walked away before vows, before contracts, before binding myself to someone who had already proven she couldn't be faithful. That thought steadied me. I hadn't been destroyed. I had escaped. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Clara had moved back in with her parents. She had lost her job after a string of absences and couldn't afford the apartment on her own. Daniel had tried to maintain their relationship, but it crumbled under the pressure, under the scrutiny of everyone who knew what they had done. Last I heard, they weren't even speaking. There was a certain symmetry to it. They had tried to build a secret world at my expense. In the end, they destroyed their own instead. Looking back, the most haunting part wasn't Clara's betrayal, or even Daniel's. It was the confession itself. The fact that I had only discovered the truth because I happened to be in the one place she felt safe enough to say it out loud. She had gone to a priest for forgiveness, but it was me who had been sitting in the dark, listening. That accident changed everything. And maybe that was the real lesson. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Sooner or later, someone's listening.